Welcome to EDU 326, Methods of Teaching Language Arts in the Elementary School, from the Union Institute and University. The title of today's video is How to Write Lesson Plans. Hi, I'm Tom Frederick. Welcome to the last week of EDU 326, Methods of Teaching Language Arts in the Elementary School. During this last week, you will apply all that you have learned in this class in order to make unit lesson plans. If you're in the 3-credit course, you must create one 5-day lesson plan. If you're in the 4-credit course, you must create 2 5-day plans. Lesson plan units must be either a literature-focused unit or a thematic unit. If you are in the 4-credit course, you must do one of each. I'm not going to spend time in this unit orientation unit speaking about literature focus and thematic units. We've done that twice already in previous units, and there's an entire chapter in the book on this topic. What we will focus on in today's video is how to write a lesson plan. The first step in writing a lesson plan is to identify the course objectives that will be addressed in the unit. The second step is to identify the assessment of the skill. In Florida, we have a document called the Florida Standards. It's on a standard web page housed in the Department of Education. And all standards for the state of Florida are standardized. The Florida Standards have a history, and in your unit this week you will be reading about some of the history of those standards. But they basically come from the whole FCAT history through the National Common Core all the way down to the Florida Common Core standards. When we get on this web page, and you should be able to see the web page on your screen now, you will see that we have the Language Arts Florida Standards, LAFS, Language Arts Florida Standards. And the Florida Standards are broken down in various ways. The first way they're broken down for the elementary standards is by grade level. We have kindergarten standards, and as we forward through it, you will see that there are lots and lots of standards. These standards must be achieved in a whole year. So you don't need to figure these standards out every single week, but throughout the course of the whole year, you will find out that there are standards. When we get to grade 1, we're going to pause, and I'm going to show you something else. Those are the kindergarten standards. Then these standards break down into strands. In every single grade level, there are identical strands. Strand 1 in grade 1 is the reading standards for literature. Strand 2 are the reading standards for foundational skills. Strand 3, as you see them all in blue, are the reading standards for informational text. Strand 4 are the writing standards. The next strands are the standards for speaking and listening, and then for language standards. Each of our grade levels will have identical strands. We're now up to 2nd grade. And I'm taking it a little bit further. Besides grade level, besides strands, there are clusters. If you will notice under the 2nd grade strand for reading standards for literature, there is a cluster 1 for key ideas and details, a cluster 2 for craft and structure, a cluster 3, integration of knowledge and ideas, cluster 4, range of reading and level of text complexity. Each of the other strands will also have their own particular clusters that match up with those strands. Take this up to grade 3, and we're going to delve a little bit further into how these standards are organized. Grade 3, same as every other grade level, lists the grade level, lists the strand, and lists the cluster, and then under each cluster there are standards. The standard code, I don't know if you can see my cursor at this point, but the standard code LAFS, Language Arts, Florida Standards, Grade 3, RL, Reading and Language, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.1 in third grade is ask and answer questions to demonstrate the understanding of a text, referring explicitly to the text as the basis for the answers. Standard 1.2, recount stories, including fables, folktales, and myths from diverse cultures. Determine the central message, lesson, or moral, and explain how it is conveyed through the key details in the text. You will see that for every single grade level, there are strands, there are clusters, and there are individual standards. And those standards, if you delve even further, they build upon each other. We're going to use this document in order to create our lesson plan. In the front of your in the front section of your online course, under the main section, there's a handouts. And in the handouts, you have something called lesson plans. And these lesson plans are the form that I want you, this is the lesson plan that I will require you to use for this lesson. No, I will not accept the form used by an internet where you just can copy and do the form. No, I will not accept the form used by your teacher in your school, because I want you, as writing your first lesson plans, to go through a process. And while all of these elements are not required when you're teaching for Miami-Dade County Public Schools or Broward County Schools, they are essential in trying to learn how to write lesson plans. Our lesson plan starts with Circle 1, Day 1, Day 2, 3, 4, 5. You are required in this class to write a 5-day lesson. Tell me which day that you're listed it. Please include your name, the subject that we're teaching, which we'll be reading our language arts for all of you in this particular class, the grade level. You may choose kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, however you feel comfortable. But I need to know it. It needs to be listed here, because I am going to be looking to make sure that you are matching up the objectives from that grade level's curriculum. And for total minutes for this particular assignment, we're going to take 60. So we're going to create a lesson plan that's 5 days long, that is 60 minutes per day. Then on this first part of the paper, we're going to come up with a concept or topic to teach. That is the big idea, the big question. In the case of the Florida Standards, that is the very first thing that was listed in blue, the strands. So you're going to list the strand as your objective. Second thing down there is called objective or competency to be achieved, what the students are to know and be able to do. Those will be the cluster. So you will list the cluster that you are selecting the objectives. And the last one there is the standards to be addressed, where you will list the exact standard. Then the expectation will be that the rest of the lesson plan deals with the strand, that cluster, and the particular objectives, because that's what you're supposed to be teaching. Next on your lesson plans, you must list your required materials. No, Dade County Public Schools does not require that. Broward counties do not require that because there are union issues with it. But for creating your first lesson plans, you need to be able to list the stuff that you are going to need in order to do this lesson. The next section is a step-by-step procedures, including your time allocations. Remember, for this lesson, 60 minutes per day, and you will have whole group and you will have small group activities. In today's day of age education, you will have more small group than you will have whole group. So don't expect in these lesson plans to just include whole group activity and then do a little bit of small group. Figure out on whole group that you're going to do 15 minutes with students whole group, and then you're going to plan some small group activities. Notice the explanations under small group. Explain how you will differentiate the lesson based on the student's learning style and multiple intelligence addressed. If students visit different learning centers, explain what they will do in each center. Small group instruction is essential to these weekly lesson plans for this course. Then we end up with assessment. Evaluation based on the objectives. You must describe how you'll know the students learned what it is that they're supposed to learn. If you can't determine this from the lesson, then describe what and when they will be tested or assessed on this lesson. There are many ways to assess students. You can assess students by simply listening to their answers. You can assess students by having them take a test. You can assess students by student observation on how they're doing in small group instructions. The last part of your lesson plan is the adaptations. We need to list the adaptations for our students who are non-English speaking students, for students with learning disabilities, or for students who are behind the other students in their reading ability. Things that you can do here is to work on them in small group, extra time, work with them individually when you can. You can shorten their assignments. You can give them additional time. There is a document called the FCAT 2.0 Accommodations, a quick reference guide on accommodations and modifications. While this is for the old excuse me, FCAT test, it is a modern list of accommodations. We will look on that on this particular page, and we will focus on pages 17 through 32. Accommodations for students are essential when it comes time for testing. It evens the grounds for students with disabilities. They are equally as essential when you are doing class lessons. Students who are going to get accommodations when it comes testing time should be getting accommodations all along throughout the year so that they're used to it, and those accommodations actually work to their advantage. This guide is 64 pages long, but we're going to go to page 17 and we're going to look at our accommodations. Excuse me. Let's drag this guy down a little bit. On page 17, we will find that accommodations are changes or adjustments to standard instruction or assessment procedures or procedures that enable the student with disabilities to participate in meaningful education programs. In the quote down here, we will see that the goal of assessment accommodations is to remove causes of irrelevant variance in each student's test performance, thereby producing a measure of each student's knowledge and skills that is valid. There are certain categories of accommodations. You students can receive accommodations in presentation. They can use specialized formats, including Braille, sign language, oral presentation, or other assistive devices, including for ELL students, the use of Spanish to English dictionaries. Responding. Students can respond differently on tests and in classrooms. They could use dictation, sign language, or other assistive technology. Most relevant is scheduling. Some students, very many students, need additional time in order to complete assignments. And here we will either give them more time or shorten the assignments in the classroom so that they can meet those accommodations. We can give accommodations in setting. We can change the location to which assessment is given. If a student does not respond well in a total classroom, we can make it possible for him to take tests, We can make it possible for him to do assignments in a more closed setting. No, not necessarily out of the classroom when you're doing instruction, but if you can take a student to the side with a little carol and give them that sort of accommodation works. And there's all types of assistive technology. We can have students work in small groups with other students. We can have students in triads where you have one of the really proficient students and one of the middle students and one of the lower students together. Lesson plans are very important, and accommodations are very important to the classroom. I'm going to give you an analogy. Suppose you're at an airport. Imagine meeting the pilot of your airplane at a coffee shop an hour before your flight. After becoming acquainted, you discuss the flight. What you really want to hear is something like this. The pilot saying, we'll be taking off from runway 2, flying first northeast into the ocean, or over the ocean. We don't want into the ocean, definitely. We will then follow a flight plan that'll take us to east of Orlando, over the city of Jacksonville, flying at a height of 32,000 feet. We will begin our descent about 15 minutes south of Atlanta. After final flight instructions, we'll land on runway 3 right on time. Now imagine if you met the same pilot an hour before your flight and the conversation went this way. How would you feel if you heard this? I'll get to the gate about 15 minutes before we're scheduled to leave. I'll then look at the flight plan to see if any adjustments need to happen. We should leave pretty close to be on time. If something goes wrong, I'll have to make adjustments. When we take off, I'll find some clear air and fly towards Atlanta. I've been doing this a long time, so everything will be all right. How would you feel if you heard that? Teachers are like pilots. Good pilots do not only follow a flight plan, they review it, personalize it for the day and the circumstances, then they professionally implement it. Good teachers do not only follow a lesson plan, they spend time developing it to meet the needs of their children, then they implement it with love. Tom Frederick, Union Institute University, Methods of Teaching Language Arts in the Elementary School.